You wake up. That was your first mistake. Not because you're tired, not because it's cold, not because your bed is a suspicious pile of straw that smells like old cabbage and regret. No. The real problem is the year. You open your eyes. Europe. The year is 1348, which means you've somehow managed to wake up during one of the worst disasters in human history. Congratulations. Out of every century you could have chosen, you picked this one. Outside your tiny window, a church bell rings. Then another. Then another. You assume someone important has died. That's adorable. At this point, everyone is dying. The Black Death has arrived, and unfortunately, it already knows where you live. Let's talk about your life, or what's left of it. You are Meep, a completely ordinary medieval peasant. Your possessions include one shirt, one pair of shoes, and several potatoes that are currently losing a slow battle against mold. Financially speaking, you are hanging by a thread. Every morning you wake up before sunrise. Every evening you collapse after work. You spend most of your life trying not to starve. And somehow, that isn't your biggest problem anymore. Because while you're worrying about next week's food, something far worse is moving across Europe. Something invisible, something patient, something that doesn't care about your plans, or your dreams, or your potatoes, especially your potatoes. The first rumors arrive months before the plague. Traveling merchants whisper strange stories, entire towns becoming silent, ships arriving with sick crews, families disappearing overnight. At first, nobody believes them. People rarely believe disasters until the disaster arrives personally. Then the ships appear, huge wooden ships, heavy with cargo, heavy with trade, heavy with death. The rats come with them. Nobody notices. Why would they? Rats are everywhere. They're in barns. They're in kitchens. They're under floorboards. They're probably inside your house right now, possibly listening to this story. The rats aren't the real problem. The fleas riding on the rats are tiny, invisible, and carrying one of the deadliest diseases humanity has ever known. Of course, you don't know that. Nobody does. The microscope won't exist for another 300 years. You're trying to survive the week. Science is trying to survive the millennium. Then the sickness begins. One villager gets a fever, then another, then another. People start coughing. People stop showing up to work. People stop showing up anywhere. Soon, strange swellings appear. Under the arms, around the neck, near the groin. Painful black lumps, large as eggs, sometimes larger. The kind of swelling that instantly tells everyone nearby, this is very bad. The fever comes next, then chills, then exhaustion, then confusion, then death. Sometimes within days, sometimes within hours. The disease moves faster than the rumors, and the rumors were already moving fast. Every morning, there are fewer familiar faces. Every evening, there are more graves. The church bells never seem to stop. Ring, ring, ring. At some point, you stop wondering who died. You start wondering who's left. The worst part isn't the plague. The worst part is that nobody understands what's happening. Nobody knows about bacteria. Nobody knows about infection. Nobody knows about germs. Humanity is attempting to solve a puzzle without knowing the pieces exist. Naturally, this leads to some interesting ideas. Some people blame bad air. Some blame evil spirits. Some blame sinners. Some blame the planets. Some blame foreigners. Some blame witches. Some blame cats. Which is unfortunate, because the cats were actually helping. The fewer cats there are, the more rats survive. The more rats survive, the more fleas survive. The more fleas survive, the more plague survives. Humanity has somehow discovered a strategy that makes everything worse. A remarkable achievement, especially under pressure. Then the doctors arrive. Or at least, people claiming to be doctors. They wear long black robes, large gloves, and giant bird-like masks. The beaks are stuffed with flowers, herbs, spices, anything that might protect them from the so-called poisoned air. Does it work? No, not even slightly. But it certainly looks dramatic. Imagine being sick, barely able to breathe. Then a giant birdman walks into your room. Honestly, the plague might not even be the most frightening thing you've seen that day. Weeks pass, then months. The world begins to change. Fields are abandoned. Markets grow empty. Homes remain locked. Entire families disappear. Sometimes entire streets. The living become afraid of the sick. The sick become afraid of everyone. Funerals become so common that people stop attending them. The dead outnumber the gravediggers. Carts move through town collecting bodies. Every day, every night. The sound of wooden wheels becomes impossible to ignore. You hear them in the distance. You hear them nearby. You hear them in your sleep. Each passing cart carries another reminder. The plague is still hungry, and it isn't finished yet. Let's discuss your chances. Actually, let's not. They're terrible. Depending on where you live, between 1/3 and 1/2 of the population may die. Imagine every second person you know. Now imagine they're gone. Friends, neighbors, relatives, children, parents, gone. History often feels distant. Numbers on a page, dates in a textbook. The Black Death wasn't numbers. It was empty houses, silent villages, abandoned farms, unfinished lives. For the people living through it, this wasn't history. This was Tuesday. And then, slowly, something changes. The bells ring less often. The carts pass less frequently. The graveyards stop growing so quickly. Not because anyone found a cure, not because doctors suddenly became experts, not because humanity finally figured everything out. The plague simply began running out of people. The storm eventually burned itself out. The survivors emerged, cautiously, slowly, disbelievingly. The world they stepped into was not the same world they remembered. Entire communities were gone. Entire generations had vanished. But life continued. Fields were planted again. Homes were rebuilt. Children were born. Stories were told. Humanity carried on, as it always does. And somehow, against every expectation, you survived. At least this time. History isn't done trying to kill you, not even close. But for today, you are alive. During the Black Death, that counts as an extraordinary victory. So congratulations, Meep. You survived one of the deadliest pandemics in human history. Now go appreciate modern medicine. Trust me, the people of 1348 would have considered antibiotics a form of magic. And honestly, they wouldn't have been entirely wrong. Sleep well. You've earned it. For now.